I was working in Sublime Text 3 today with CFLint configured. I encountered some issues that I thought would be helpful to walk through. I can't imagine that people aren't experiencing this often. So if you're not already familiar, the CFLint project is here on GitHub, and the deliverable is a jar that you can download off of the releases and run to lint some CFML. So I've done that. I grabbed the current one, and let me just switch over here. So if I run Java jar and point to the jar file I downloaded and do help, I can get all of the arguments that the command supports, and this is even more that are listed in the README, which is really good. It covers a lot, but there are some hidden things in here that are very helpful. So with that in place, I could just cd to a place where I've got some components, and I could run a lint on it. So I'm going to do the same command as before, except I'm going to add debug, log error. I want output as text, and this is the file that I want to lint, and I want my results on standard out instead of written to a file. So in a moment it will parse my CFML, and based on the rules that it found, you can look at the rules for how it resolves finding CFLint RC to get the rules. That's a whole different thing. But it found my CFLint RC file and used it to format some textual output of the issues I need to go fix. All right, well, that's all well and good, but really we want immediate feedback when working in Sublime Text on CFML. Let me describe really quickly my setup that was kind of giving me some trouble. So here is a large ColdBox application, and I've got within this main application lots of sub-applications that are installed based on the dependencies defined in the box.json file here. So these are all grabbed dynamically from different sources. But one of them, this one, is what I'm working on today, and I want to make changes in here and have them appear kind of immediately within the structure of the main application. I don't want to do a package install every time I make a little change, and after doing that after having committed and bumped the version and all that stuff. So my goal here is to set up a symlink from the main package into this separate repository. But what I don't want is I don't want my CFLinter, when I'm looking at the main project, to be doing linting on any of these external modules or the one that I have symlinked here. So the goal is to disable CFLint for paths that I'm not interested in right now. And let me switch over to Sublime Text, and I can kind of show the issue right now. So here is that project, and I just opened up the same component that we ran a lint on from the command line a moment ago. And we've got the same 3 issues that were shown on the command line. I can click this icon down here and do output from SublimeLinter, and I can get information. But we can see that we get information for the other 2 files as well. So here's a module config from a dependency that was installed by command box, and I don't want to see the lint for this one. I just opened it to look up some information, but I don't want to run CFLint on it right now. Same issue for this module config from that linked external package where we have the symlink in place, and that works well to edit the project in another location, but we want to disable CFLint on this. So before I kind of make some assumptions about your familiarity with how CFLint connects to Sublime Text, let me walk through that. So in Sublime Text, if I open the command palette, I believe it's called, with Shift Command P, and then I can do package list, and I am looking for things related to linting. So here's SublimeLinter. This is the framework that other packages make use of to do linting. And here's my installation of SublimeLinter for CFLint. So with the framework and this specific package and the jar file in place on the file system, I'm ready to go. Just real quick, I will jump over to GitHub. So here's the SublimeLinter framework, so you can get lots of information about what it's doing here. And then here's the project for the contrib package for CFLint, and it will tell you how to do the package installation and how to point your settings to the jar file. So that's done in my case, and if I go to Preferences, Package Settings, SublimeLinter Settings. So here's kind of the typical setup. So linters, these are all the linters that SublimeLinter knows about. So if I had other settings, like if I were going to do more for ESLint, for example, I would add them here. I just tell it where my jar file is. If I want to globally disable CFLinting for some reason, for whatever reason, I could set this to true here. So one option for me would have been to just change my lint mode. I could have made it not to do linting in the background. I could have selected maybe only do linting on loading or saving a file, or only when I do the lint this view command, or only when saving a file. But that affects all the linters, and I don't want to change the way that ESLint is working for me. That's just fine. I don't want to affect that. This will be better if I can get it to just not lint some file paths. So I thought the solution would be just to add an exclude for anything that is inside of my external modules directory. I think that actually is the more correct pattern. But that didn't have the effect I was looking for. So linting is still functional on the home CFC. And if I switch over here, it's still running on something that I thought I was excluding. And then over here, oh, that rule is disabled, but it is still running over here too. But it's tough to know when it's running because I don't get any feedback. So the first thing that I did is turned on debug for all of SublimeLinter, and that is going to give me a lot of information about when linting is happening. So if I come back here to home, if I just add a couple of new line breaks in there, I can see that lots of information. I can see that linting happened and what the command was. Okay, that's helpful. But why over here is this file still being linted even though my expression should have caught it? Oh, oops, that's why. I forgot to comment out my package level setting that sets up an exclude. So it was setting an empty exclude. They don't merge together. The project setting replaces. So I'll fix that real quick. So we can see that the addition of the exclusion from the main user settings prevented the linter from running on this external module that is not SimLinked. But if I go to this one, I can see that it's still running. And I was having a really difficult time figuring out why that's still happening. So what I did is just blocked everything. And that way I was able to see that on this view, the file that was actually skipped is in the resolved location. The symlink was followed, and so instead of this, well, this path, we got the destination of that symlink. So that was really difficult to figure out, and what I actually ended up doing was downloading source. I grabbed the master branch and then looked at the linter and figured out that the path is being resolved here based on a symlink. And that is actually in the documentation. If we look at the docs for SublimeLinter, and then this covers the excludes section, it tells you can build up globbing path patterns here, and that the symlinks will be resolved here. So that makes sense, but it is pretty tricky to set up the correct patterns that I want. I don't really want my main project to know much about the actual location of external symlinked modules. So what I think is the best solution for this situation is to go back to the main user settings and not perform excludes here. So we'll turn back on linting for everything. And now if we go to the main project here and we add a configuration for a project setting that's going to override the user settings, and it has to be done this way. I guess just the way that settings are merged, you have to create the property names flattened, and then they'll be resolved in the appropriate hierarchy. You can't do something like this. Right, you get the idea. So this is the correct way to do it. So I left this in here because I was doing some debug to just make sure that I understood the paths that were being excluded. So for the modules that exist within the hierarchy of the project, I'll add this exclusion, and that's the same exclusion that I had over here, and that's going to work okay for something like this. And then I want to add a special pattern here It's special for two reasons. One, it uses the negate operator, so anything that doesn't match something in the project path, that is going to be excluded. This is going to work to prevent linting anything that's not within the parent module, or the parent project, a module of the parent project. So if I save this, we should still get linting on this. We do, that's good. And we should no longer get linting on this. That's good. It was excluded by this rule, or pattern. And we should no longer get linting on this. Perfect. So we can see how that variable was expanded, and that is described in the docs. If you follow this link to settings expansions, it gives you a list of the settings that you could use as variables inside of patterns, and it works in other places, but I didn't give it a try. I only really needed it for this excludes pattern. So that is the solution. Now, one more thing. Let me just everything's still working. I've got these patterns in here on my main project. Let me go to the sub-project. And what I would probably want to do here is to define my linter so that when I'm working directly in this project on, say, that same file, I want to get my linting here, and that's working okay. But I wouldn't want, let's say that in this modules directory, let's say I had some dependency and it was installed in here. Again, I wouldn't want to be linting that, so I would add this sort of pattern, and that should prevent any linting of dependencies. I think that about covers it. Hopefully that made some sense.